When did you last do something purely because it made you feel good? Not productive, not useful, not impressive to anyone else. Just good. Take a moment with that, because most people, when I ask that question, go quiet. They think about it, and then they realize the answer is either vague or it was a really long time ago. And here's what that tells me. Not that you're unhappy, not that your life is bad. It tells me that most of us have gotten genuinely confused about what happiness actually is. We've treated it like a destination, like a feeling that shows up when enough things finally go right. A promotion, a relationship, a cleaner apartment, more money in the account. And then we wonder, okay, things went right. Why do I still feel hollow? Here's the real problem. We've been measuring happiness by how we feel instead of by what we do. And that distinction sounds small. But once you actually sit with it, it changes everything. The last decade of psychological research tells a different story about happiness. It's not primarily a mood state. It's an output, something that comes from the way your life is structured, the choices you make consistently, and the environment you live in. That's the sentence I want you to hold on to. Happiness is an output, which means it's something you can actually engineer, not by forcing yourself to feel better, but by understanding the specific, small behaviors that create the conditions for it to appear, and appear consistently. I spent a lot of time in this research, and I want to be honest with you before we go further. When I first started looking into the science of happiness, I assumed it was going to be soft. Gratitude journals and morning walks, nice ideas with weak evidence. What I actually found was way more precise and way more interesting than I expected. Turns out, happiness isn't just a lucky accident or a genetic lottery. It's a skill, and researchers have gotten specific enough now to identify exactly which habits actually move the needle, BD new, and which ones barely register. Let me walk you through 7 of them. Habit 1, they notice what's already there. Most people spend the majority of their mental energy on what's missing, the relationship they don't have, the version of themselves they haven't become yet, the life that's one more achievement away. And the brain is literally wired to do this. It's called the negativity bias, and it exists for evolutionary reasons. Threats mattered more than pleasures if you wanted to survive. But here's what the research shows. Gratitude creates a self-reinforcing loop. The dopamine release makes the experience of gratitude itself rewarding, which makes your brain more likely to notice things to be grateful for, which triggers more dopamine. Neuroscientists call this a positive feedback spiral, the exact opposite of the rumination spiral that drives anxiety and depression. The mechanism actually matters here. Glenn Fox at USC ran a landmark neuroimaging study showing that when people experience genuine gratitude, the ventral striatum and medial prefrontal cortex light up, the same regions activated by food, sex, and social bonding. Gratitude literally activates your brain's reward system, and the effect compounds. Research from Indiana University found that people who practiced gratitude journaling for several weeks showed altered neural activity in the medial prefrontal cortex that persisted months later. Not while they were journaling, months after they stopped. That's not a mood trick. That's structural change. Habit 2. They move their body, even when they don't feel like it. Happiness isn't just psychological. It's biological. Sleep quality, physical movement, nutrition, exposure to natural light, all of these influence the neurotransmitters involved in mood regulation. Serotonin, dopamine, the whole system. And the key word is all. These aren't optional lifestyle upgrades. They're the biological foundation that makes emotional well-being possible in the first place. When that foundation gets chronically neglected, feeling good becomes genuinely harder. Not because of attitude or mindset, but because your brain literally doesn't have what it needs to generate the right chemistry. The happiest people seem to understand this instinctively. They don't wait until they feel motivated to move. They move because they know motivation usually comes after movement, not before. Habit 3. They focus on what's in front of them. This is the one that surprised me most when I first found the data. Researcher Matt Killingsworth built an iPhone app that pinged people throughout the day asking what they were doing and how they felt. 650,000 real-time reports from more than 15,000 people. And what he found was that people are significantly less happy when their minds wander compared to when they're focused on what they're actually doing, even if what they're doing is something mundane, like commuting. Think about that for a second. Even commuting. Even the part of the day most people would call the definition of boring, when people were actually present for it, they were happier than when their mind was somewhere else. The mind wandering itself is the problem, not what the mind wanders to. The act of mental absence is what correlates with lower well-being. So the habit isn't necessarily formal meditation. It's just presence, returning your attention to where you actually are, in small moments throughout the day. Habit 4. They invest in depth, not breadth, in their relationships. This is the part that I think changes everything. The Harvard study of adult development is the longest-running happiness study in the world. Started in 1938, followed 724 men from their teenage years into old age, and later their spouses, and over 1,300 of their descendants. What did 80-plus years of data actually show? The quality of our relationships, emotional warmth, trust, support, Neil, is the single most consistent predictor of long-term happiness and health. Not how many people we know, how safe and truly connected we feel. And here's the finding that genuinely stopped me cold. People's satisfaction with their relationships at age 50 was a better predictor of physical health than their cholesterol levels were. Read that again. Relationship satisfaction at 50. Better predictor of health than cholesterol. Not better than stress or sleep. Better than a medical measurement we test for specifically to predict heart disease. Which is wild when you think about it. The happiest people aren't those with the biggest networks or the fullest social calendars. They're the ones with a small number of relationships that feel genuinely safe, where they can be honest, where they feel known. And the research also shows that small talk is negatively associated with happiness, while substantive conversation is positively associated with it. Depth of exchange is what matters, not frequency, not quantity. Habit 5. They do small things for other people, regularly. I know, this one sounds too simple, almost moralistic, but the neuroscience behind it is genuinely fascinating. Acts of generosity create what researchers call a helper's high, end quote. A neurochemical reward that actually boosts happiness. And the most effective version isn't occasional large gestures. It's small, frequent ones. Here's why. Your brain releases oxytocin when you connect meaningfully with another person. It releases dopamine when you do something that feels rewarding. Acts of kindness trigger both simultaneously, which is why giving something small can shift your emotional state faster than receiving something can. A 2019 meta-analysis pooling data from more than 4,000 participants found that kindness interventions produced a moderate but consistent boost to well-being. Not euphoric, steady, like a tide that rises a few inches and stays there. And honestly, I think that steadiness is the whole point. The happiest people aren't chasing emotional peaks. They're building emotional floors. Habit 6. They choose experiences over accumulation. Here's the thing nobody really talks about when it comes to happiness and material stuff. The research doesn't say money can't buy happiness. It says we're systematically bad at predicting what will make us happy once we have it. Many lottery winners end up no happier than their peers down the road. Yet research suggests that when people spend money on basic necessities or moderate consumption, they actually feel more secure and more satisfied. The problem isn't wealth. It's what we do with it. Stuff you adapt to. A new couch becomes invisible within weeks, but a dinner with someone you love, a trip somewhere unfamiliar, a conversation that genuinely surprised you, these integrate into your identity in a way that possessions just can't. A study published in Nature Neuroscience found that people feel happier when they have more variety in their daily lives. Regularly going to new places and having a wider range of experiences reliably boosts positive emotions. The brain isn't looking for more, it's looking for new. And the happiest people seem to understand this without needing science to tell them. They're curious. They try, think, not because they're restless, because they understand at some level that novelty is a form of nourishment. Habit 7, they protect their time more than their money. This is the one I think gets most underestimated by almost everyone under 40. Researcher Ashley Whillans at Harvard Business School has spent years documenting what she calls time poverty, the feeling of being chronically rushed, overwhelmed, without real control over your hours. And people who feel this way consistently score lower on life satisfaction, positive affect, and mental health. We live in a culture that glorifies busyness. Packed schedules get treated as evidence of importance. But the research is pretty clear on what that busyness is actually costing you. A study published in PNAS found that people who prioritized buying time over buying things reported significantly higher life satisfaction. Yet, relatively few people actually made that trade-off. A systematic miscalculation in how we spend our resources. The happiest people protect unstructured time the way they protect money in a savings account. Not because they're lazy, because they understand that the quality of their attention and yearly and their entire experience of being alive depends on having some portion of the day that isn't spoken for by someone else's demands. Okay, I want to zoom back out for a second, because there's something important running underneath all 7 of these habits. Research by David Watson and colleagues suggests that roughly 1/3 to 1/2 of daily emotional experience is stable and trait-like. The rest shifts with what people actually do, moment by moment. That remainder adds up. That changeable slice is where these habits live. And the reason most people never fully access it isn't because they lack willpower or discipline or information. It's because they're still treating happiness as something that happens to them rather than something they participate in building. Most people look at a genuinely happy person and assume better circumstances, better luck, an easier life. I think that completely misses the point. Then, the research doesn't support that interpretation at all. Studies from positive psychology suggest around 40% of our happiness potential comes from deliberate habits rather than circumstances or genetics. 40%, that's nearly half of how you feel on a daily basis, shaped not by what life deals you, but by what you choose to do within it. And none of the 7 habits we covered are dramatic. That's the thing. None of them require a life overhaul. None of them cost money or demand an hour of free time you don't have. They require something smaller and honestly harder. Attention, intention, the willingness to make a slightly different choice in a specific moment on an ordinary Tuesday. Here's what nobody tells you. Deeper happiness doesn't announce its arrival. It accumulates quietly, the way compound interest does, in choices small enough that you barely notice making them. The people who seem genuinely at ease with their lives usually aren't people who found something the rest of us missed. They're people who did something the rest of us kept putting off. They started small, consistently, and the brain, patient, plastic, and responsive as it is, met them there.